morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Chattanooga. I'm so glad that you've joined us today, whether you are visiting us for the first time, you've been here several occasions before, or you're a long-term member. It's good to see you this morning. And a greeting to those who might be watching this service, recorded service in a couple of days. You are welcome here, wherever you are on your faith journey, whomever you love, whatever your affiliations. Our called minister, the Reverend Mandy Goheen, is off today. My name is, I'm the Reverend Pam Johnson. I'm the affiliated community minister of this congregation, and it's my pleasure to be with you this morning. I'd like to start by sharing some words from James Luther Adams, Unitarian minister and theologian. This is from his essay, A Faith for the Free. The free person does not live by an unexamined faith. To do so is to worship an idol whittled out and made into a fetish. The free person believes with Socrates that the true can be separated from the false only through observation and rational discussion. In this view, the faith that cannot be discussed is a form of tyranny. An unexamined faith is not worth having, for it can only be true by accident. A faith worth having is a faith worth discussing and testing. I'd like to invite Jen Horning up to light our chalice and ask you to join with us as we say these words. We begin our services, UU churches all across the country and the world, indeed, begin their services by lighting a chalice to hold this sacred time and space. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit and join with singing Come, Come, Whoever You Are. We often have sung this as a round. Today we're going to sing it in unison. The young or young at heart to come forward for our story this morning. Would anyone like to join me close by? All right, coming with enthusiasm. I like that. Well, unfortunately, I could not find the book. My son had this book. Oh, and I forgot to change. Good, thank you for changing the screen for me. Today, the grown-ups are going to be talking about deconstructing faith. That's kind of a big word. So let's break that apart. Do you know what construction is? What?
Construction is like building things.
Construction is building things. So what do you think deconstruction means? Tearing something down. There's a little subtle meaning, a little difference with that. Hang on to that because I want to come back to that. Nicholas? Breaking something into different parts. So deconstructing is sort of the careful tearing something down, looking at it, examining it, deciding what you want to keep, what you want to put away. Totally tearing something down is more like demolition. So we've got 3 levels there. We've got construction, we build things, we can take them apart carefully and examine them closely, see what's good and what might need to go by the wayside, and demolition. So today in service, we're going to be talking about deconstruction. And sometimes deconstruction involves looking at something from a different perspective. So I bet sometime in your youth you have heard the story of the 3 little pigs. I heard it ever since I was a little kid. Well, this is the true story of the 3 little pigs, told from a different perspective. Everybody knows the story of the 3 little pigs, or at least they think they do. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story because nobody has heard my side of the story. This is a wolf talking. I'm the wolf, Alexander T. Wolf. You can call me Al. I don't know how this whole big bag wolf thing got started, but it's all wrong. Maybe it's because of our diet. Hey, it's not my fault if wolves eat cute little animals like bunnies and sheep and pigs. That's just the way we are. If cheeseburgers were cute, folks would probably think you were big and bad too. But like I was saying, this whole big bad wolf thing is all wrong. The real story is about a sneeze and a cup of sugar. Way back, once upon a time, I was making a birthday cake for my dear old granny, and I had a terrible sneezing cold, and I'd run out of sugar. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now, this neighbor was a pig, and he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house of straw? So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it fell right in. I didn't want to just walk right into someone else's house, so I called out, little pig, are you in? No answer. I was about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake, and that's when my nose started to itch, and I felt a sneeze coming home. Well, I huffed, and I snuffed, and I sneezed, a great sneeze. And do you know what? That whole darn straw house fell down, and right in the middle of the pile of straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. He'd been home the whole time. Well, it seemed a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner lying there in the straw, so I ate it up. Think of it as just a big cheeseburger lying there. Well, I was feeling a little better, but I still didn't have my cup of sugar, so I went to the next neighbor's house. This neighbor was the first little pig's brother. He was a little smarter, but not much. He'd built his house of sticks. I rang the bell on the stick house. Nobody answered. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? He yelled back, go away, wolf. You can't come in. I'm shaving the hairs on my chinny chin chin. I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on, and I huffed, and I snuffed, and I tried to cover my mouth, but I sneezed a great sneeze. And you're not going to believe it, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. And when the dust cleared, there was the second little pig, dead as a doornail. Wolf's honor. Now, you know how food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open, so I did the only thing there was to do. I had dinner again. Think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better. And I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. So I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second little pig's little bigger brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He'd built his house of bricks. I knocked on the brick house. No answer. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? And do you know what that rude little porker answered? Get out of here, wolf. Don't bother me again. Talk about impolite. He probably had a whole sack full of sugar. And he wouldn't give me even one little cup for my dear old granny's birthday cake. What a pig. I was just about to go home and maybe make a nice birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I sneezed once again. And then the third little pig yelled, "And your old granny can sit on a pin." Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when somebody talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. When the cops drove up, of course, I was trying to break down this pig's door, and the whole time I was huffing and puffing and sneezing and making a real scene. Well, the rest, they say, is history. The news reporters found out about the 2 pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to buy a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting. So they jazzed up the story with all that huff and puff and blow your house down. And they made me the big bad wolf. That's it. The real story. But maybe you could loan me a cup of sugar. Thank you for joining me in this story. And it's time for you to go down to religious education classes, and we will sing you to your classes. Let's take a few moments of meditation to rest here, relaxing our bodies, bringing ourselves to this place, letting cares and concerns from this morning or last week, set them aside. And spend a few moments being present, breathing in and out. Focused on this moment. As the music begins to play, I invite you forward if you wish to light a candle of joy or concern to mark something deep in your heart. Jen and I lit additional candles for those concerns and joys that remain in the heart, and for those people that will be watching the service later that have deep things on their minds as well. Let us remember to be gentle with one another. I'm going to start a little bit with a disclaimer. I'm a little nervous this morning. I'm doing some experimenting. I usually preach from a script, and I'm not doing that this morning. I'm using more of a bulleted list, and I'm hoping for the inspiration to make these transitions go well. But I'd like to start with asking how many people here were born into the Unitarian Universalist Church? Okay, we've got about 4 folks. That's not unusual. That's not unusual, though it's probably more typical in the Northeast, where there's quite a bit of history in Unitarians and Universalists there. And how many of you are what we call come-outers? You came out of another faith and came here? Many more, just what I suspected. As come-outers, we probably had to do some deconstructing of the faith that we were brought up in. For me, that was Christianity. I was raised in the Southern Baptist Church. My father was a minister of education there, so it was all that I knew for the first part of my life. There are a lot of reasons people leave the church. Some people, as they grow older and learn whether it's about evolution or other things, find that the religion of their youth and rational thought are incompatible. And so that's a reason that drives them away from the church. Other people may have received unsatisfactory answers to their questions, or perhaps some platitudes to just don't think about that too much, just keep going. Some people may have had a very deep personal loss or tragedy that shook them, wondering where is God in all this, or how can bad things happen to good people? And the answers that they found, or perhaps the platitude that everything happens for a reason, was just not satisfying. And so they left the church. And then there are people who left because of deep hurt. Either from manipulation or abusiveness of church leaders, or they left because their identity was not accepted, or they experienced some sort of religious trauma. So there were many feelings that people can leave church with. It can be disappointment, it can be loss, guilt, grief, despair, anger, and maybe even a combination of all those. So you are here this morning, though. You have walked back in the door, whether that was this morning for the first time or whether you've been here a while. So you have chosen to reclaim something, to rework something, to find a different way, a better way, to find a place where your identity, whom you love, is honored, to find a way of reconciling your spiritual beliefs with your rational side of your brain. It may have taken courage for you to walk away. And it may have taken courage for you to walk in this door this morning. So today, whether you're checking us out for the first time or you've decided to make a home here, you're welcome. And know that you will be supported in your path, whatever that is. There are others that we don't see here this morning. They left the church without a backward glance and kept going. Or maybe they found another path that sustained them, or focused more on their private spirituality. So this whole idea of deconstruction is a natural one. It's one of the stages of faith. James Fowler, who was a professor of theology and human development at Emory University, in 1981 published a book entitled The Stages of Faith. And he gave these 6 stages really fancy, intellectual, highfalutin names that you probably won't remember and may not have a whole lot of meaning for you. But those have been simplified, thank goodness. I'm not sure exactly who chose these other words to support them, but I'll be using them to refer to the stages of faith. The first one is faith that is caught. This stage of faith happens when we are young. Preschool years, where we don't necessarily have words, but we have more images, connections, relationships. We see what is happening around us. We might, it might be the love of our parents or a nursery worker. It may be attending church and seeing people light the chalice or reading the scriptures or things like that. It's faith that is caught, no real rational thing involved with that. But when we get to school age, and as we develop in our thinking and become more rational in our thought, sort of, and do that, we say that we've got to the stage where faith is taught. This happens between about the ages of 6 and 12. Fowler names this stage the mythic literal phase, which is pretty easy to remember. But children at that age often cannot distinguish between myths and what is literally true. So for me, when I was in the Southern Baptist Church, I remember attending Sunday school and vacation Bible school, and very often the stories were told by the teachers, accompanied by religious art. Whether that was Daniel in the lion's den or Jesus with children on his knee. And so we learn those different things about the basics of our faith. When we get a little older, in the teen years, we say that faith is bought. That's where we get buy-in for the faith. In my experience, since my dad was a minister, we were there every time the door was open, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night. I participated in choir, of course, Sunday school. I think it was on Wednesday nights, doesn't matter. There was a group for girls and boys were separated in their religious instruction. It doesn't make sense to me now, but anyway, way back in the old days, the group used to be called Girls Auxiliary, which was kind of akin to the women's auxiliary, but in the 70s, when I was this age, they called it Girls in Action. And when I looked at it years later, I thought, basically, you know what that is? It's Baptist Girl Scouts. You could earn recognition for the different religious things that you did, for witnessing, for distributing Bibles, or doing service projects, things of that nature. It's a chance to bond with other people. There was youth group. We went on mission trips to different parts of the country, choir trips. And so I had the buy-in. Possibly because I'm oldest child, possibly because my dad was a minister. I had some leadership in the church. I remember we had a church musical about the life of Jesus, and I sang the narrator's role on one of our mission trips to Pine Knot, Kentucky. Interestingly, the boys were sent off to build a building or rehab something, and the girls taught vacation Bible school. And evidently, even though I was just a teenager myself, I was asked to teach the teenage class at vacation Bible school. So I bought into all that. That was my sense of identity. Not that I didn't have questions. There were friends of mine who talked about, well, God told me this or that, and I'm kind of thinking, nope, I don't hear any voices in my ear. So there were parts that I didn't really fit in with. I don't know if I've told you this story before, but at one point in a probably a middle school or high school Sunday school class, our teacher was talking, I guess she was talking about dating and marrying and all that, and she asked us to write down on an index card the characteristics we would like in a mate. We did it anonymously, and so we handed those in, and she starts reading them out, and she says, I see this person didn't put Christian at the top of their list, and that was mine. So, I had my questions. I was trying to buy in, but I kept trying to be that good Christian, to what was it that was wrong about me that didn't have me hanging on to that? I didn't consider the fact of deconstruction at that time. It was more like trying to fit in. So the next stage of faith, once we have that buy-in, as you can imagine, at ages, say, 18 to 22, is faith that is sought. It coincides when most of us go to work or to college. For me, that transition to that stage of faith, that seeking for something, to sort of looking for what else is out there, what can I believe anymore? For me, that coincided with two things. My father was fired from the church when they found out he was gay. Didn't receive much church support with that. So there was some hurt from the church from that as well. So I went to college. I was fortunate. I went to a Baptist college for the first 2 years. I was fortunate to have the more liberal of the Bible professors there, and started learning things like, the the books of the Bible were brought together by committee. Isn't that interesting? What about this divine inspiration stuff? So there were some little cracks starting to form. Things are different than what I'd initially been taught. Another key event for me was as a sophomore there at Anderson College, which is now Anderson University. Again, I was sort of in a leadership role, and someone had nominated me to be the president of the student union, Baptist Student Union, as a sophomore. But I was later told by another friend that had been rejected because I was female. So that idea that women cannot be in leadership, sort of more cracks start to develop. I left and I went to the University of Tennessee and decided to, the biblical illusion would be shake the dust off my feet from the Baptist church, and decided to, maybe I'd check out the Presbyterians instead. Maybe that would be a different thing. And I was very blessed to have a campus minister who engaged us in a lot of theology, of questioning, supported our search, brought forth different ideas. In fact, I probably heard about stages of faith initially from him. He was current on things, and so I found that very rewarding and enjoyed trying to make more sense and using my intellect and rational side. When I was in high school and in college, I think my science classes, the biology was taught more from the sort of botany, zoology end. So I don't know that I even really heard much about evolution until I was late college or possibly even early graduate school. So that was another thing that's like, wait a minute, this is something pretty different. What, this creating the world in 7 days? What's going on here? But the biggest thing that really shook me was when I was probably a senior in college, and I took a course at UT entitled The Images of Jesus. Now, we looked at the four Gospels, what are called the four canonical Gospels, the one that showed up in the Christian or Catholic Bible as you might know it. But in addition, we looked at some of the other Gospels that didn't make it into the canon. Pretty interesting to think, okay, there were these other Gospels out there. Who decided what got in and what not? Why this and not the other? I think the thing, and I'm looking for my note here that I can't find, but I think I can remember it. The thing that was sort of, I don't want to say the nail in the coffin, but the thing that really shook me terribly was to read in the infancy Gospel of Thomas that when Jesus was a little boy, he made some clay birds and caused them to fly. Not that that wasn't wild enough, but his friend saw that he did this on the Sabbath, which of course is against the rules in the Jewish faith, and so the friend basically tattled on him. So in response to that, Jesus struck him dead. So, wow. That it's one thing to believe Jesus healed somebody. It's another to think he's striking somebody dead and making clay birds fly. So that was a pretty big deal. I wasn't sure what to do with that. I remember part of the liturgy in the Presbyterian Church is to recite the Apostles' Creed, which kind of talks about all the beliefs. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was born of the Virgin Mary, blah, 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 all this. And I realized at some point, all I could say with honesty and integrity was, I believe in God and Jesus. That was it. And so when I left there, it was sort of a natural break when I left Knoxville. I finished my graduate school and I ended up here in Chattanooga, and that was sort of a natural break. I didn't have that environment there with the minister at the Presbyterian Student Center, so I started looking around. For a while, I didn't attend anywhere at all. I had a teacher that I worked with that was a Baha'i, so I checked out that faith, and there were a lot of things about that were very appealing. Some of their beliefs in terms of acceptance of people and world peace were good. But then they had these other things that said, part of their theology or their doctrine was that when you died, you should not be embalmed because that would keep your spirit around too long, and you shouldn't be cremated because that would make your spirit leave too fast. And that, drinking was disallowed. Not that I'm a big drinker, but, So I didn't feel like, there was this integrity there. How can I take on another faith if I can't agree with all of it? And so I eventually found my way to the Unitarian Universalist Church, which interestingly, the campus pastor, the Presbyterian, actually brought a UU to one of our Sunday evening meetings. So that was where I actually first heard about Unitarian Universalism. So that started this next stage of faith. There was sort of this wandering in the wilderness, again, to use a biblical allusion. Where are my faiths? It was very depressing for me to have something that I had been raised in for so long, believed as true, to all of a sudden be pulled out from under me and sort of lost my sense of bearing. And maybe some of you had that experience. For me, I didn't have so much anger as great disappointment and loss and grief was my experience of that. So what's next? Well, first of all, a religious educator has said that, Ed Fowler himself said that this seeking area, this sought faith, a lot of people tend to get stuck there. They just kind of keep questioning and never really go any farther. They're just kind of stuck. We know from living in this area, the purported center of the buckle of the Bible Belt, that we have a lot of people that are stuck in the bought phase, that are in the literal interpretation of things, and they don't progress any farther than that. But after we do that seeking, sometimes we look a little deeper, and the next stage is called wrought faith. Faith that we actually work on, we hammer out, we test, we try, we expose, we think, we question. And over the years, I have done that. I know a lot of you have too. For me, for the longest time, I wasn't sure what to do with that Christian faith. Was I still a Christian? Was I a Christian by another name? I don't know how much of it might have been in this area to call yourself a non-Christian is kind of a risky thing to do, and I was sort of wanting to fit in, How much of it was that? Or do I had a different sense of Christianity than the congregations I'd been a part of in my youth? So there was a lot of exploring. And over the years, I have particularly started looking at that, examining at things more closely, reading a few books. There's one by Marcus Borg, who is a biblical scholar, called Reading the Bible Again for the First Time, who sort of chronicles his own transition from a very little understanding to sort of a new understanding and then a broader understanding. And that is like, okay, I can get my head around that. Because even though I cannot believe the literal things that happen in the Bible, the earth was not created in 7 days. I think it is probably very unlikely that miraculous healings occurred. hearing things about translations. For example, the Israelites were supposed to have, God parted the Red Sea for them to go through. But to read that translation was probably a little skewed, and it was actually the Reed Sea. So maybe it was more like a swampy area that they got through that the chariots of Pharaoh could not. Or to realize that the interpretation, the translation of the word from the Greek translation is that Jesus was born to a virgin, whereas if you go back to the original Aramaic or whatever the other was, it was simply that she was born to a young woman. Another book that really had me looking at things much differently was written by Bishop John Shelby Spong. He was a Catholic priest. I think they eventually kicked him out. He wrote a book entitled Jesus for the Non-Religious. I read this book along with a group of folks from this church. This was at a kind of a monthly dinner group thing that we had. And in this book, he looks at all the scholarship and kind of systematically dismantles all of these myths about Jesus. You know, for example, saying that the story in Luke says that people came to Bethlehem for the census, all the house of David. Well, when you look at it, if you look at David and all the generations from then, the number of people that would actually have to come to be counted, there certainly would be no rooms in the inn anywhere for lots and lots of people, not just Jesus. So he sort of dismantled all this, but it was very freeing because in place of that, it's like, so why would people say all this stuff? I think my earlier understanding was they were just telling a bunch of lies, or they were just doing this big marketing thing and they wanted everybody just to believe. And it seemed more like a trickery thing to me, which was very disturbing. But after reading Spong's book, I realized that if we set aside this literal understanding of the Bible, that we look at it more, number one, as a book that is written, as a group of books that are written by people who are trying to understand their relationship to God and their relationship to each other. And that it is a historical book, that we have to consider it in the context of the time. And that there are many metaphors that they would have used at the time that some of our other folks will translate as true. But if we see them as the metaphor they are, all of these things about Jesus, my understanding was that it's trying to capture what a powerful person this was, how much he changed people's lives. How can we set him? It was marketing in a sort, but it wasn't marketing in a sort of a trickery sort of way. It was trying to convey in language, which is so limited, the unique person that Jesus was. That Jesus was a deconstructionist sort of himself. He had to tell the Pharisees, I came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And then I think it's in the book of Matthew, he talks about, you have heard it said, but I say. You have heard it said, but I say. So he was kind of turning things up on end. So that was a little detour that I wasn't sure how much I was going into, but I did, so here it is. So let me try to get back and kind of wrap this up a little bit. That's part of my story, and yours may or may not have followed along in that vein. I'm sure you have your own stories about critical points along the way that took you from the faith that you came out of into the faith that you are seeking and crafting and forging here. So, number one, many of us have walked away. We've liberated ourselves from the old destructive beliefs, and we come here to use our freedom to explore what we do believe. One of the hard things I had to think about was, okay, let me go back a minute. Part of my analysis or critical analysis of the Christianity that I was brought up in, and I think I came to this realization about the time I was in seminary, was that The religion of my youth, or that Christianity, was about personal holiness. And believing the right things. It was all about belief. The focus was on belief. And we know that that idea is out there. I was talking with a family member of one of our hospice patients, and I think he knows I'm not the traditional Christian, but he said something like, "It's not enough to be a good person." And I thought, I feel like how wrong that is. Belief can almost be like an idol, making the Bible into an idol, or it can be an easy way out. Yep, I believe on Jesus Christ, I'm saved, I'm done, don't have anything more to do. It shouldn't be that easy. If you're truly being saved, if we look at that from a whole idea of healing, my understanding of sort of the purpose of church or the purpose of life is to become whole and to make heaven on earth, which I think is what Jesus was about. I think he was bringing wholeness to people. He was reaching out to the most marginalized in society. The tax collectors, the sinners, the woman who's caught in adultery, not to mention where's the man, So he was bringing about wholeness, and he was showing that love. So for me, that is the key. That's the crux of what I can hold on to. Somebody described themselves as being a Jesusian rather than a Christian, so maybe that's what I am, as a Jesusian. But anyway, getting back to my point of, the religion of my youth was about personal holiness. But I have to take a strong look, and maybe to ask all of us to take a strong look. Have we come here and we exchanged one set of right beliefs for another set of right beliefs? Are we in our faith here? Are we still forging our faith? Are we living it out? Or are we just glad to be more enlightened and to be around other enlightened people, and that's it? Something for all of us to think about. James Luther Adams, the theologian I mentioned in the opening words, says church is a place where you get to practice being human. Hopefully, we can do that here. That we can challenge one another, that we continue that spiritual and religious search, that we can practice what it means to be human in relationship as we sometimes break covenant and then remake it, as we find our gifts and our leadership skills, as we work through our own shit and try not to pass it along to other people. But if our faith is about deeds, not creeds, we need to take what we have learned here and take it out somewhere in the world. We need to have that wrought faith, that faith that is tested. The last stage of faith, I don't know if I included it on there or not, because there's the whole set of things. The last stage of faith that hardly anybody gets to, this is like a Gandhi or a Mother Teresa, stage 6, the universalizing faith. So we're more likely to get up to stage 5 and maybe not so much to stage 6. As we go forward, I'd like us to think about how can we build beloved community both inside these walls and outside these walls. James Luther Adams again says this: the faith of a church or a nation is an adequate faith only when it inspires men to give, pardon the sexist language, only when it inspires men to give of their time and energy to shape the various institutions, social, economic, and political, of the common life. A faith in the commanding, sustaining, transforming reality is one that shapes history. Any other faith is thoroughly undependable. It is impotent. I hope that as we go from this place that we can inspire each other to search for our faith, to test our faith, to participate in that hammering out, to find ways to make our faith real and to make it have substance. So might this be. I'd like to invite Andy forward to share with us a social justice moment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andy. My pronouns are he and they. And I'm going to share the last segment of our pagan and earth-centered social justice moments of the summer. And today I wanted to share a little bit of something that aligns more with my personal beliefs of the matter. And it's something I learned about from Reverend Mandy, which is great. My faith is developing as I grow in my membership here. And this is a quote from Ursula Goodenough, who is a religious naturalist, and she wrote a book called The Sacred Depths of Nature. And she asks, who is a religious naturalist? A religious naturalist is a naturalist who has adopted the epic as a core narrative and goes on to explore its religious potential, developing interpretive, spiritual, and moral ethical responses to the story. Importantly, these responses are not front-loaded into the story as they are in the traditions. Therefore, the religious naturalist engages in a process, both individually and in the company of fellow explorers, to discover and experience them. These explorations are informed and guided by the mindful understandings inherent in our human traditions, including art, literature, philosophy, and the religions of the world. Religious naturalists seek to develop coherent and satisfying meta-versions of their interpretive, spiritual, and moral responses to the natural world. Some may go on to produce books, articles, blog postings, films, art, music, and poetry that offer these syntheses for others to consider and learn from. Importantly, all of these projects are proposals. At this stage in the journey, our core text is nature. I just love that last part. Our core text is nature. So thank you all. And I suppose next month the Social Justice Committee will continue on with these moments. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Andy. Each week we collect an offering for the life and work of this church. If you're visiting today, or if your budget doesn't allow, I invite you to let the plate pass you by. But if you've been around a while, if you're a member of this church, I invite you to give as generously as you're able to sustain the life and work of this church. Please join with me in our words for offertory response. We give these gifts freely, committed to our mission to care, create beloved community, awaken hearts and minds, resist injustice and act with compassion, embrace life and care for the earth. To this work, we dedicate our offerings. Our closing song is number 1058. I'm not sure if we have sung this one before or not, but it's pretty easy to learn. However, Tori is going to sing it through once for us so that we can kind of learn the melody, and then we'll sing it through, after that we'll sing it through twice together, so maybe we can include this one. The words from this are from another, let's see, I can't remember if he was Unitarian or Universalist, Theodore Parker. Thank you.
The number is 1058 in this. The number is 1058 in this, if you want to follow along. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its sacrifice, works of love.
So what? I'm going to sum up so what in this Kenyan prayer. From the cowardice that dares not face new truth, from the laziness that is contented with half-truth, and from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, good Lord, deliver us. Jen? Please join me in the words for our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but keep the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world. This is a time for announcements. I would invite you, if you have an announcement, go ahead and move to the front so that it can proceed a little more quickly. Looks like Farron has one and set it up here, and Jen. Farron?
Hello. Much better. Hi, everyone. My name is Farron. I'm the office administrator here, if y'all haven't seen my face. I just have a quick office announcement. If you happen to see in Reverend Mandy's Monday Musing newsletter, the hours in the office are going to change beginning next Monday, September 4th. All of this week, we will have our regular office hours. We're in the office Mondays, 1 to 6, Wednesdays, 10 to 2, and Thursdays, 10 to 3. Beginning next week, we will be in the office on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 11 to 6 every day. Have a little more uniform hours if you guys need to come during like your lunch hour and run a couple errands, stuff like that. You're welcome to stop on by. That will be posted on the website, the newsletter, all of the major points, the front door. Just wanted to let you guys know that that change will be coming. So I'll hand this off to whoever's next.
Skip Stevens broke her arm a week and a half ago. Mandy called me this morning, so we're going to do a meal train. If you're interested in being part of that, let me know and I'll make sure to send you the link. That's all.
All
Hello. I have two announcements for you this morning. The first is a save the date on Sunday, September 24th, at around 12:30, right after service. The Pagan Collective will be hosting a Mabon autumn equinox ritual outside. It's designed for all ages. There will be fire, so children will need a designated adult. So put that in your calendar. More information will be upcoming. And our next Books and Beyond read is The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay. We will be meeting this time. It'll be on a Tuesday. It's autumn, and everybody's calendars are really busy, so this was the only day we could find. Tuesday, October 17th, around 6 p.m. It'll be right here. This is a great book. It was a National Book Award finalist. There are two separate plot lines in this book. The first takes place in the mid-'80s in Chicago, and it follows a group of young men as the AIDS epidemic is really ramping up in that area and what happens to them and their relationships. The second is, I think, in 2015, and the sister of one of those men is searching for her estranged daughter in France. And this book was both heartbreaking, and it was funny, and just really vibrant characters. It was a great read. So there will be a sign-up sheet there in the back, and this copy will be available if you want to look through it.
Two real quick ones. I'm Judy, co-chair of the Social Justice Committee, which will be meeting at 12:30. You're all welcome to join us. We have a full agenda of a lot of exciting things happening. And the second one is Mary Ann and I, who kind of created, well, we did create this tree. We could use a couple strong people that would help us move it down to the RE room after service, if you're so inclined. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that Skip broke her arm while she was at the eye doctor's office, finding out that she has wet macular degeneration. I don't know if any of you know what that really means, but I lost all of the vision on one eye from that. And there is treatment for it nowadays. You get injections. But she's pretty worried about that. And I just thought that along with our meal train, any of you who may have had experience with especially wet macular degeneration, give her a call, share with her a hopeful experience. I think you feel very, very alone. I certainly did for a few weeks until I just made a decision. I could still see with one eye, so I was going to have happy days and not sad ones or angry ones. But I think it really is helpful to have encouragement for somebody who's walked in your shoes. And I especially appreciated that sermon today because I certainly walked in your shoes every step of the way. It was so meaningful, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I had an announcement too, Sally, and then I'll let you, I can just do from here. My announcement is if you want to do some deconstructing faith around the Bible, I'm going to be leading a 5-session class on the Hebrew Scriptures this fall. It'll be held on Sunday afternoons after church from like 12:30 to 2:30. We're going to be using a book written by UU minister John Burens, who is also a president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It's called Understanding the Bible. And I've bought about 4 or 5 copies of the book used, which if you would like to purchase one, I paid like $6 for them. So anyway, I'll have a sign-up list, and it'll go out in the newsletter this week as well. So see me after the service or sign up later.
Any other announcements?
I'm going to be the weird one because nobody has to do anything, but whoever either did or arranged for that lower lot to be mowed, thank you, it's really nice.
Yes. And you can always check our newsletter and the back of your order of service to see other things that are going on that may not have been mentioned. For example, we have a teen gathering coming up on Wednesday. Awesome. We need that sort of thing. All right, that is it for today. Also, I'm Sally, your board rep. Have a great week. Go for it.
Please join us for coffee after the service.